we kick off the afternoon with this very interesting panel focused on the German market. Unfortunately for our panelists, I do not speak German, but fortunately for the audience, I will have to impose English because we have a very diverse audience here today, all interested to learn a bit more about the situation of FTTH deployment in Germany, by far the largest market still to be covered with fiber, with 24 million households still to be passed, and close to 37 million subscribers still to take the service. So it's a large opportunity. It's a major challenge for the whole of Europe to make sure that fiber is rolled out and adopted in Germany. So I will very briefly introduce you to our esteemed panelists. And from my left to right, I would like to say hello to Klaus Müller, President of Bundesnetzagentur. That's good, yeah. My German is improving day by day, but that's basically the regulator for Germany. To his left, Srini Gopalan, board member and managing director at Telekom, Deutschland.
Thank you, it's good to be here.
Welcome. And Michael Jungwirth, a member of the executive committee at Vodafone, Germany.
Thank you,
to your left, Michael, is Andreas Pfisterer, CEO of Deutsche Glasfaser. And last but not least, Georg Budden, CEO of Deutsche GigaNetz.
Thank you.
So welcome and a warm thank you for accepting to be on this panel. The session will be divided in two parts. First of all, I will ask each panelist to give a 5 minutes opening statement to share with you their key position on the situation of FTTH deployment in Germany, and then we will start the Q&A part of the discussion. So maybe, Klaus, if you want to start, I think if the clicker works, I'll bring this first holding slide to give you the opportunity to develop your 5 minutes statement.
Well, thanks a lot for inviting me. I will just make 3 short points. First of all, you all know we have a very dynamic development if you look at the German market. We see a lot of companies, we are grateful for that, investing into fiber. That's good. We haven't seen that in the years before, so we are quite optimistic what we see at the moment. Point 1. Point 2, there are 2 challenges from the regulator's point of view. First of all, we need to find a good, a fair, a reasonable solution concerning open access. So at the moment, we are talking to a lot of actors on the market, listening quite closely, understanding day by day better what could be a good solution. That's the first point. And the second thing we need to do, and this is probably a very German task, you all know we've got lots of copper. We have lots of consumers getting quite happily around with copper. But we all know this is the past, and we need to talk, and we need to head to the future. So the Bundesnetzagentur established, it's not my deed, somebody else started with that, but we see a lot of folks every 3 months. And we have a very confidential and a very good talk. How do we manage the switch from copper to fiber? This is very easily said. You know, a lot of Germans are rather conservative people. That's not bad, but it's a little bit difficult if you want to get them used to a new technology. So how do we communicate? How do we take them any fears they might have, especially if you're a little bit older than the average I see in this audience? How do we convince them that it's a good idea to go this way into the fiber world? So at the moment, we are less a regulator, we are a little bit more a moderator. We want that all the actors talk, share information, talk how can we lower the cost for everybody and make it as efficient, as successful as possible. And we are quite grateful for the market actors that at the moment, and I'm very optimistic, everybody is pulling on one string in one direction. This is the second field, what the regulator's business is at the moment. And the third thing is, some of you know I have a past as a consumer protection person. We need to convince people why they need to be happy and look forward to the fiber world. And let's be honest, for the vast majority of people in Germany, it's something they talk about with their friends. And then they say, oh yes, that's the future in 10 years. And then they maybe decide to sign treaties, to pay, and to do the step they need to do. But that's not good. We need more of these decisions right now, or at least in the next months. So what can industry do? My colleagues on the stage, but even more of them, what are the applications which are easy understandable for an average person, not those digital natives, they're not my problem, but for an average consumer, how can we convince them to say, yes, fiber is the future, not only in 10 years, but in the next 1 or 2 years to come? So these are the 3 tasks we are talking about. Thanks.
Thank you so much. You say fiber is the future. So how is Deutsche Telekom adapting to that fiberized future?
Right. Well, thank you very much. Just a quick introduction. So I'm Srini Gopalan. I run the Deutsche Telekom business in Germany. And interestingly, I have a fairly long history with fiber. I'm Indian by origin and then spent a lot of time running our Central and Eastern European operations at Deutsche Telekom. So I think this is about the 11th or 12th country I've been involved in rolling out fiber. And let's just say it's the most interesting of the countries that I've rolled out fiber in. But no, so look, for Deutsche Telekom, we are the largest copper player, but we made a conscious decision back in 2020 to start moving to fiber. We rolled out 600,000 households in year 1, 1.2 million in the next year, 2.1 the year after that, 2.5 million last year, and we'll do another 2.5 million this year. So we're accelerating our pace of fiber rollout. And it's not been a straightforward task, because we almost had to set up what I call a startup within our company, right? And it's our fiber startup. And it's run separately. It is a fiber startup in many ways, because we had to change numerous things. You know, when you run a traditional business that's existed for a while, when you've had the network for a while, you tend to run it nationally. Fiber is a regional business. So we had to reorganize almost the entire business to move to much more of a regional focus. It needs new skills, right? We just last year hired 1,000 new skills purely for fiber, right? Those skills aren't necessarily immediately available in this market. So it's been one hell of a journey. I mean, compared to learning German, I think it's been a little tougher, but it's been a fascinating journey, and I'm grateful to have been part of it. I brought along a picture, which for me is kind of the story of what constrains us and what moves us forward. So this is a picture of someone that we call a digital or a digital Baubegleiter, which is somebody, a digital companion. So why do I use this picture to describe the state of fiber in Germany? To me, it describes both what holds us back and what pushes us forward. So if you look at it, there is a trench there. Now, this is actually a medium deep trench, what in Germany we would call Mindertiefe, right? And one of our biggest issues in rollout in Germany is the specification of the depth of the trench. And I know that sounds bureaucratic, but it makes a massive difference. Let me just pull back and kind of give you a 2-minute recap of it. Germany actually has more fiber closer to the home than any other European country. On average, you have fiber 300 meters away from the home in Germany. Yet, it costs 2 to 3 times more to connect a home in Germany with fiber than it does with any other European country. Why is that? It's both a physical thing and a digital thing, which is why I brought this photograph along. The physical bit is the specifications of the trenches that we have to dig in Germany, right? They are the deepest trenches anywhere in Europe. And we would save 30 to 50% of our cost if we could get to medium deep trenches. Unfortunately, that decision is made at a local municipality level, which is hard because there are 11,600 odd communes in Germany. The second issue, which is the digital issue, and the reason we have this photograph here, what this person does is using a smartphone actually films the progress of the trenching. And that film gets directly uploaded back to our center, which gives us a clear sense of the quality and the progress of the work. Now, why do I bring digital and physical? The digital bit is the state of our administration. So we land up needing a minimum of 6 permissions, but it can be up to 18 permissions, right, to dig in Germany. So the physical now, and all of them are normally on paper. Our Bonn office, our Bonn Technical Center, won the award for the most paper printed within Telekom Deutschland because they had to print each of their fiber permissions. So what holds us back and what drives us forward is all there in this photograph for me. It's a combination of giving us the capability and the flexibility to dig safely but well and economically, and digitizing our processes. Right? We can talk about a lot of things that hold up fiber in Germany, but it is a fundamental contradiction that the country with the most fiber in Europe has the most expensive way of getting to a household. And that's the contradiction I'd love to talk about in this panel.
Very clear. Thank you very much. Michael, Vodafone Germany, can you explain a little bit where you stand and how you see the future of fiber deployment for your company?
Yes, certainly. I want to talk about competition. We are the challenger nationwide of Deutsche Telekom. We are having a DNA as being a challenger. We are investing heavily in fiber, some 7 billion euros the next 6 years with our partner OXG, our joint venture. And I have to say, there is the competitors investing the most in Germany. In 2023, double the size of Deutsche Telekom, competitors invested, private money. So it was some 8.7 billion euros last year, double the size of Deutsche Telekom. So it is essential that we keep competitors in the market and keep them flourishing. Competition is making a difference in this country. I want to take you now on a journey, and I want to imagine, or I want you to imagine, sitting in a Porsche, going on a highway in Germany at full speed, right? At full speed. How does that feel like? It feels like freedom, right? Like progress. We are getting somewhere. Speed. And then I want to imagine you, someone grabbing the steering wheel and trying to get you somewhere in the ditches, right? Getting you off-piste. This illustrates for me clearly what the situation currently in Germany is. We are making massive progress. We are on the fast lane, on the overtaken line currently. But there is some force driving us elsewhere. We are seeing every day that we are, compared to other countries, making more progress than others. We have been very good in accelerating gigabit deployment. We have been massively good in attracting private money for fiber rollout. We have been really well supported by the BNetzA and also the government when speeding up processes. We are getting somewhere. But there's 3 forces that are now grabbing our steer wheel and trying to get us off-piste. First force, reduction in competition. We are seeing that there is a trend from switching from copper to fiber, that this might create new monopolies. We are seeing Deutsche Telekom is clocking some 60% market share in fixed. Is that healthy? Question mark. Do we really need to discuss further regulation? For the deregulation for Deutsche Telekom? Question mark. Other issue, is it really good and for the benefit of Germany that we allow players to communicate a rollout and then not deliver on it, postpone it? This is destroying business cases, and it's depriving Germany of fiber rollout. Next question, is it really wise that we allow overbuild in Germany? In that sense, we are doing it right now. Or is it to the worst of Germany? Question mark. So competition is essential. Second force that is grabbing our steer wheel is, to a certain extent, in Germany we are not exercising and exploiting the full extent of the things that is in our hands, of the means that is in our hands. What do I mean with that? There's literally no market in Europe that has no regulated duct access in Europe. Germany is not having regulated duct access. And why is that important? Because if you have got access to duct in a very transparent way, you needn't overbuild. You can use an existing infrastructure and rent it and save massive billions of euros for not digging up the earth in that sense. I'm advocating, let us make a push here. Let us do that for the benefit of Germany, not for the benefit of one player, but for the benefit of Germany. There is massive speed up if we get this thing right. Last element, and this is the third force driving us to the ditches, I call it, how shall I phrase it now? I call it unintended consequences of political decisions. What do I mean with that? And this was already mentioned. We are currently supported by the government very well, saying we need to speed up rollout. Right, great, we are doing that. Brilliant. There is a proposal then going into the decision-making process, and the outcome is that there is no real speed up, but extra burdens for the telco industry. This is happening as we speak, right now. The so-called TK Nabeck is a brilliant example of we want to help the telco industry, but out of the meat grinder of decision-making, there is actually extra burdens. And this has to stop. I know it's not intended, but we have to stop that because this industry cannot absorb it anymore. We need progress. So to summarize, there is a bright future and additional rollout for fiber if we get competition right, if we exploit the means that are in our hands better, and third element, if we refrain from putting extra burdens on the industry. If we have this package, then I do think that our Porsche is going to accelerate massively. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. Moving to Andreas, at Deutsche Glasfaser, what is your view on both maybe that dynamic, but also maybe the hurdles making this progress difficult?
Let me start off just to give you a quick introduction to Deutsche Glasfaser. It's the second biggest FTTH player in Germany after the incumbent in our, let's say, focus areas, predominantly rural and suburban. By the way, this is where more than 50% of all people in Germany live, right, which are underserved with digital infrastructure. And we've been around for more than 12, 13 years almost in terms of deploying fiber, especially bringing that to that part of Germany. I'm now almost 18 months with Deutsche Glasfaser. My capacity as CEO, I previously worked for the incumbent in Denmark for TDC, one of the most digitalized countries in the world, also with, let's say, leading in terms of mobile as well as FTTH coverage, and also pretty much digitalized in many, many ways. So I've seen the potential of great leading edge infrastructure, what it can do to growth, prosperity in general of society. And when I came to Germany, it was a bit of a shock. So we say, although I've been German, it was a bit of shock to return after 6 years to Germany to see how far we are. Of course, we've accelerated over the last years, but in essence, if you look on the numbers, and we can always debate that, we still have 2/3 of the way to go to just to bring fiber close to households. And we have less than 8-9% of customers and businesses actually using fiber infrastructure, right? So I mean that's the reality and the truth for the biggest economy in Europe, right? For the driver of growth and prosperity for all of us in Europe, and that's the bitter reality. Sorry to say if I'm a bit pessimistic on that one, but on the other hand, let's not complain about it. The question I'm asking myself is, what can we do all together here on stage, but in the whole ecosystem and telco to really drive, let's say, further deployment of fiber and also, let's say, penetration of the infrastructure and active use, like also my colleague said here. And I think there's two answers to that kind of equation. The first answer is open access. And the second answer is driving copper decommissioning. And let me a bit elaborate on those two aspects. Open access is an extremely good opportunity where all parties in the market, consumer, businesses, ISPs, but also the infrastructure companies can benefit from, right? So you don't need to squander resources of doing, let's say, duplication of infrastructure. You basically have an easy way, especially if you think about bitstream products, to have easy integration to services. You have very low hurdles for ISPs, for infrastructure providers to browse our services and make it usable for many parties. And to be honest, it's also more sustainable, right, in compared to, let's say, a passive product, passive infrastructure access. So there's many good examples why open access is actually an important aspect. And funny enough, if you compare it, for example, to Denmark, it was the incumbent on a voluntary basis with a separation and with a clear commitment of pursuing an open access strategy, which is to some extent also probably the reason why Denmark is so far in terms of fiber deployment and as well as penetration of infrastructure across the full industry. So I think that is one equation. And the other second answer to that one is copper decommissioning. Obviously, the EU Commission also identified that in terms as a key kind of lever for, let's say, accelerating faster FTTH rollout, but also in terms of making sure that we get active customers on those networks. And for me, it's a bit like a call for action, because they also were very explicit by saying it should be done by 2030, right? And it's not about starting it, but it should be done by that time. And obviously that needs to be seen in the broader context of where we are in Germany today. But I think there is still a long way to go, and we need to get started, and we need to accelerate in terms of defining the framework for doing that kind of commissioning. What are the products and services which we need to carry over from the old legacy world of copper into FTTH world? I mean, what is the kind of processes, the systems which we need to have in terms of ensure interoperability between the different kind of players in the market? And then obviously one of the key things is what is the regulatory and the commercial framework around making sure that we are migrating as many customers as fast as possible in a good and meaningful way. And more importantly, it needs to be non-discriminatory. So it should basically not favor or to be to the strategic advantage of the incumbent. So I think these are two major levers which can help to accelerate further deployment of fiber, but even more importantly, the penetration and the active use, because this is only when it really unlocks the benefit for society and not just digging it into the ground.
Absolutely. I mean, open access, copper switch off, those are 2 points we're going to come back to in our discussion. Jan, I'm turning to you. Same question, your initial statement. What is important for Deutsche GigaNetz?
Yeah. Thank you, Vincent. We all enjoyed this industry now for 15 years, I think. The last 5 years, the podiums could have been the same being said right now as it was today. We would also enjoy if we would agree on clear definitions of the numbers. We just learned less than 8 or 9% are really have activated households with fiber 100%. So that means we are talking about a market which still is 90% empty. In markets which are empty, there is normally no reason to fight. We are talking here about the largest privately financed infrastructure growth market in Europe. It's a market which still needs about 140 billion euros in order to reach a 90% penetration. And that market needs certainly foreign capital, it needs planning security, and it needs a light build, a role model. With the current pace of the last years, I think we'll be in the year 2045 at less than 70%. And there is a massive gap between what we hear in political announcements and regulatory and, let's say, stakeholder announcement and actual reality. We cannot bridge that gap as entrepreneurs, as companies. Deutsche GigaNetz is number 3 in terms of deployment of fiber, and we feel the permanent distraction. And we are not only entrepreneurs, we're not only companies who build out fiber, we are also citizens of this country which really needs fiber. You all know fiber is a German invention, 1960, in Eastern Germany, by the way, and we're the last one using it. And we have no Erkenntnisproblem. We know what we have to do. We have outlined several times, repeatedly, where we should be heading. And this light build is something which we can calculate. It's pure math, it's physics. We know how many households we have, we know the ground classes, we know where fiber has been deployed, and we also would know what we would have to do in terms of regulatory environment. As of today, we see there's always someone having a reason why things don't work. But what we need in order to accelerate is a konzertierte Aktion, a concerted action. A light build where we're heading, where we know the market is empty, we need a long stop date subject to fiber deployment when the copper is being switched off. We need this accompanied by the public media to explain why fiber is the future for this country, why the digitalization of this country only will happen with fiber. We need certainly cooperation with the incumbent, and we need a proactive incumbent who is willing to have a symmetric open access. And that includes that we need to stop that overbuild or the announcement of the overbuilds. That is harmful for the economy, it's harmful for every stakeholder and every investor. Srini, you're having the same, let's say, requirements for your investors as we have. They all have their IRR returns, and I really appreciate you just said before this meeting, let's see how we can develop this together. You know, that would be really in everyone's interest if we find a way that it's economically balanced, how we can have freedom to deploy large clusters. Because we also have to think about the services being provided later on. With currently 600 fiber providers in Germany, who will ever be able to come from the service level delivering the service levels which are needed? And there's a lot of risk if we continue with this, let's say, patchwork network, which is limiting us in the future. Again, it's investment which should last for 100 years, in the future, on realizing what fiber would be capable to do. So what we need is a fair business practice. We need a fair and balanced business practice. And most importantly, we need to agree on this light build. That light build, that role model, means a clear mandate when copper is being switched off, no overbuild, maybe a voucher model, large homogeneous clusters, symmetrical regulation. We have all what we need. Aggregation of the, let's say, construction industry, which still is infancy. We can go through this learning curve together in a market which is empty, and I would really appreciate if there's more reasonability and economically sound behavior of the participants. We need also the investors. They need planning security. As you know, these large investors, there's another conference in parallel where the last year's fiber was always top of the list, and we had them all there. The biggest investors in the world are currently here in Berlin. Now fiber is not on the list. You know, they're talking about data center, there's clean energy, the power, but fiber is currently off the list. And that is exactly what we don't need, because we know this is a super attractive market. We know it's a 50% EBITDA margin. But if we don't have planning security and can agree on the next future model, we run into difficulties which we don't need.
Well, thank you very much. Some investors are here.
Some are here, yeah.
And I welcome them greatly on this panel. Maybe before we move to these topics, you all mentioned, you know, copper switch off, overbuilding, open access. Maybe just coming back a little bit about the perspective in terms of development. We have this objective of 2030 presented as, you know, gigabit for everyone in 2030. We hear now 2030 should be a date for copper switch off. What is maybe your take on what is possible to achieve both in rollout but also in adoption for Germany, providing things are going the way you expect, but there are still some physical limitation in many ways. So what number should people expect for the German market in rollout and adoption between now and 2030, I guess, would be my question, maybe starting with you, Srini.
So 2-3 things, right? I think, firstly, by there were a set of interim goals. We said 50% and then 100%, 50% by 25, 100% by 2030. I think we will get to 50% of homes passed by 25. We can come back and debate homes passed versus actual customers, but the way we set up the goals was that. And if we believe all the numbers, then we will get to 50% by 25. And I actually think we certainly, as Deutsche Telekom, intend to continue to keep our pace on rollout, right? Now, look, I think we have a shouting chance of getting very close to fiber everywhere in 30-ish. Certainly, we'll play our part in that. I think the biggest constraints are, in my mind, 2-3 things, right? Number one, the conditions. By that, I don't mean regulation. I find it amusing that people talk about competition and regulation at the same point in time, but never mind, I'll come to that. But I think it's the conditions around which we operate. And I gave you some examples of that, right? From what type of digging methods are you allowed? It's a huge difference in cost. We're talking 30 to 50%. To how digitized is the process, and therefore how quickly do you get there? Two things like how do you set some of these conditions nationally versus all of it being decided at a local level. I'll give you a trivial example. The health and safety standards around digging in Germany are 3 times more expensive than next door in Netherlands, right? And that's what you've got to do every day when you dig fiber, right? So now another example, we talked a lot about take-up, right? Now there's an assumption that there is a lack of demand. I beg to disagree, right? German consumers consumed 1 TB on their fixed line, terabyte, per annum in 2015. Today it's at 4.5. The number of devices attached to the Wi-Fi used to be 7, today it's 12. There is enough demand, right? The issue is the process of getting there. So for example, if you go to a multi-dwelling unit, you need to wait till the annual meeting of all the people in that multi-dwelling unit to get permission to enter, right? Those are, now you look at the difference between multi-dwelling units where you have the permission to enter, you get 40, 50% take-up, versus when you don't have anything, right? So it's and these are not the big corporatized so-called WOWIs. This is even in the smaller households. I think it's much easier for us to be all doom and gloom and talk about 2 things. One is, how German consumers actually don't want speed. I think that's a complete myth, right? And second is, and it's a pity because I was hoping in this panel we would actually spend time dealing with the real issues rather than the rhetoric. And unfortunately, we will, as an industry, continue spending time with the rhetoric, right? I'll give you a few examples of the rhetoric. We talk about overbuilding. It's 2.5% of the total amount, of the amount that's built in Germany. Now, you talk about announcement of overbuild. The Bundesnetzagentur has a body that monitors it. 50% of the time, we are overbuilt. 50% of the time, we're overbuilding, right? Now, and that's within this 2.5%. Michael raised the bogey of the ugly competitor, right? And made various references to the dark arts that we practice. Now, the reality, my friend, is we announced Berlin 2 years ago. You announced 500,000 overbuild in Berlin 2 weeks ago. So, look, I don't want to waste my time discussing this, frankly, rhetoric, right, which is basically competitive in a world, as Jan said, where we all have room to grow. Right? There's also a fundamental contradiction between saying we want competition, but we don't want infrastructure competition. So explain that to me. I want competition, but once I've built, I want a monopoly. We say investors will get scared by competition, so please don't have competition. And then at the same time, we say, but we'd love a lot of competition. My only request is, can we please stay away from the rhetoric, be adult about this, and deal with the real issues we need to solve. On ducts, it's before the Bundesnetzagentur. I'm sure Klaus and his team will do a good job of coming up with what the right answer is, right? Let's not use this as a place to lobby for things we want. Let's talk about the real issues facing this industry and find solutions to them, right? So from my perspective, look, do I think there is a shortage of demand in Germany? No. Will it take time? Yes, right? I mean, even if I look at our copper business, we had something like 20% of our customers above 100 megabits in 2020. Today, that number is about 60. There is demand. You can see that demand for data growing. Half the time, the issue is we get in our own way through a combination of the fragmentation of not regulation, but governance, how things on the ground actually happen, by the lack of digitization, and by the elaborate processes we put around ourselves. We are stopping ourselves from getting to the consumer, rather than this being some dark art that the incumbent is somehow playing games around and stopping that, right? And I think as an industry, frankly, the more mud we sling at each other, the more damage we do to each other. Rather than actually focusing on, if we really want Germany to digitize, can we please spend some time figuring out how the whole Netzbeschleunigungsgesetz gets implemented? Can we work together to make that happen? That would be my plea. My perspective, there are more reasons to believe in the future than constraints, but it needs us to go and solve real problems that happen on the ground.
Well, thank you. My initial question was only on perspective of rollout and adoption, but you gently moved the conversation to a different level.
I feel the need to react.
Absolutely. No, I got it.
When the panel threatens to become a stage for rhetoric. So.
But I'm sure that's a nice invitation to the other panelists to react to your last statement. So, Michael, please.
Like, I'm a half glass full guy in that sense, and I agree with Srini on the thing that there is common interest for rollout, for speeding up rollout. I totally agree, but I think it's no surprise, and I didn't mean to grow under your skin in that sense, you know. I do think that there is a common interest also for this country to have transparent duct access, because it can limit or even extinguish overbuild. So yes, I also agree that you will be taking the right decision in that sense, but I think it's not a question of is Deutsche Telekom or anyone having a benefit. It's for the best of this country. Look, we could save billions of euros if we just grab this, you know, chest it's a hidden treasure chest, right, that we are having in Germany. It's a thing that we should profit on, not as a company per se, but as a nation. And it has once been built by the taxpayers. So why not use it better?
Sorry, can I disagree with that? It hasn't been built by the taxpayers.
Yeah, in the 90s, yeah.
No, it was not built in the 90s. 2006, it started with our rollout. We did not inherit anything. Again, can we please not use this as a stage for rhetoric? It was not funded by the taxpayers. I'm happy to walk you through the detail of it. But we cannot lie on stage, I'm sorry.
Okay, can we agree on one thing? Regardless who built it, there is something in it we could use.
I agree
to the
with
best
that.
of the country. Right?
We've got someone accountable for it, so.
Yeah, so I think there is no real problem in that sense, but we simply need to get the hands on here and use it. That's my point.
Okay, I would like to give Andrea and then Jan a chance to briefly comment on, I would say, the number perspective. What do you see towards 2030? Yeah. And maybe we bring the discussion on overbuilding, because that's one point we've been touching upon, which was also identified before preparation as a subject you would like to talk about. But maybe Andrea on the perspective.
So coming back to your question, so I think the first topic is we probably will not see any further acceleration in fiber deployment. I think Srini also said it, they will continue with the same kind of pace as they have rolled out last year. We, by the same, will also continue with the same kind of pace. But I mean, if you look on the macroeconomic environment, higher interest and higher inflation rate, you will likely see more, probably even the risk of a slowdown in fiber deployment in Germany. So 25, I think I'm still bullish to say we're probably going to achieve that one from an HP perspective. But talking for 2030, the reality might look different, right, in terms of having really full fiber coverage by that then. On the other hand, there's no value in having just the fiber laying in the ground if people are not really using the product. And I agree also with Srini. There is demand out there. I mean, we already have 30% of our footprint with active customers, which I think is industry leading as such. And then once we complete those projects, we are probably even more towards the 40% already. And obviously, with our approach towards open access, we're trying to push it even further and faster, so we actually get those infrastructure utilized and the benefits also for the end customers as well as the returns for the investors. So, and I think that needs to be the focus. What is the kind of framing and environment which helps us to faster deploy fiber in the industry, because there's still a lot of way to go. I mean, 2/3 is still to be deployed, and actually significantly increase. And we probably talk about things like overbuilding and these kind of stuff at a later point in time. But doubling infrastructure while we're still trying to raise and trying to get it out is probably not the smartest way of doing it if you have the overarching goal of getting towards 100% as quickly as possible and a high adoption rate.
Well, thank you. And Jan, pessimistic, optimistic? Are we getting, where are we going to land in 2030?
First, Srini, I need to comment. You didn't inherit some ducts. You inherited a full company. Yeah? You inherited a full company with 45 million customers, free of any debt. Yeah? So
sorry, if we want to spend time on this, I'm happy to. But this is not the time or the place. We didn't inherit ducts. Yes, we did have customers. They're two different things. I think we'll all agree.
You inherited massive cash flow to provide the ducts, and you're using part of that cash flow to not only overbuild us.
So guys,
but
we want to spend time now changing the argument form.
I think this is important.
No, but I'm sorry, I have a right to object if what you're saying is palpably untrue. Are we now going to discuss whether Deutsche Telekom should have been privatized or not? I mean, where do we want to go with this conversation?
Well, we want to go that there was a fiduciary requirement in the privatization that in the interest of this country, you would invest in the future of the digitalization.
Which we have.
That has not happened to the extent expected. Moreover, what's called overbuild, to a large extent, is extended to what we call overselling, which means that you are going in at 30 to 50% of the areas which have been pre-selected, where the sales is happening of us and our other market participants, selling, having your thousands of rangers going exactly into these regions where we want to deploy. That is harming the future of this country. It's not helping anyone, and it's simply against everyone's interests, including yours at the end, because the model should be something different. We should agree on the service level. Now, coming back to the deployment, we will see that a lot of cases, especially of the smaller ones, will come under pressure, where we see that liquidity becomes more a key element in the future. I think the big 3 or 4 will take the majority of the, let's say, deployment in the future. And if we don't secure a clear change of paradigm in terms of investment security, planning security, and have this concerted action, I believe the fiber deployment will reduce. And it will take a while until that market recovers. And that is unnecessary. We know what has to be done. We know exactly what can be done to accelerate. There is no argument about what actions to be taken. I just mentioned them before. So if we would agree on these actions, we can come to 2030. I don't think it's going to happen, but 2035, we can have a 90% deployment. But that only works if Srini and the regulator and Bundesnetzagentur, Monopolkommission, everyone else would work together, because there's more to earn by working together than to lose.
Okay. I just want to turn to Klaus. You said you had a view on overbuilding, and then we'll close the overbuilding, maybe a topic to move to something more like how cooperation can work around the concept of open access, which I think is also something which will appeal nicely to the audience, because the concept of open access is shared in many countries. But maybe a last word on overbuilding before we move to the other topic.
We are listening. We are listening to a lot of cases which have been provided to the Bundesnetzagentur in the last months by now. We are still receiving cases. We are still structuring them. We are in a very intensive dialogue with our ministry, because it's not only a regulatory topic, and we are not finished listening.
and the audience is listening. Okay, well, I'll be satisfied with that answer.
That's good.
So you're not going to share any of your pre-analysis?
No, not today. We are sharing information as soon as we are sure we are finding a good decision and a good analysis.
By the way, if I may chip in, I think this conversation shows that, competition is alive in that sense. And if we are not all agree, I think it's generally not a bad
I think what you're saying is competition is alive as long as I get to keep my regional monopoly.
Well, may I go back to my point of open access? They're giving me a very tough time. But it's great to have that conversation with you guys. Open access, I think someone told earlier, I think it was Jan, that a lot still need to be done. I mean, we have here in Germany the chance to be in front of a very challenging and fascinating opportunity to grow fiber everywhere in the country. So from that perspective, and with the idea to make the best use of investment, whether it's public money or private investment, it makes sense to cooperate. And I heard also in the discussion previously that everybody was quite happy to look at it from a cooperation point of view. So how can open access principle and model be applied to the specific situation of Germany? How do you see this functioning, and how do you think it could be further improved?
Look, we are personally committed to open access on everything we build, and that's how we're regulated in copper, but it's also the principle we've used in fiber. And so anything we build is open for anyone to use, or quite often the basis of that is our copper wholesale prices, on which are regulated, right? Now, broader open access, and cooperation, I think we have 3 or 4 principles. In my mind, firstly, we've been very, very open to cooperations. We're working with close to 30 state workers who are the local municipalities who also build their own infrastructure. We're absolutely, we've got 2 joint ventures where we build with them, and these work at a local commune level. In fact, last year, I think 1/3 of our entire build came through cooperations or some form of open access versus our own build. We're also very open to have conversations, but which fundamentally have to be commercial on other terms of open access. So we are happy to buy where the commercial terms make sense. For us, it is an industrial make or buy decision, which is do the terms of the open access give us sufficient incentive to buy from there? Right? And that's as simple as it is. My only objection is if we confuse, again, quasi-monopolies with open access. If you say, I've built in this area, the only option is to buy from me. I never say that. I build in an area, anyone else can build there, you can still buy from me, right? I think when it becomes hard is when we cross this gray line between what is open access, which is a principle I completely support, and the alternative principle, which is once I've built, it's mine. The Highlander principle of once I've got the land, it's mine. That is a problem in my mind, right? I'm very happy to, and we're probably amongst the largest buyers in an open access world in Germany today, right? We're very happy to go away and do that for fiber, right? We're very happy to do that, but the terms need to be right. It needs to make economic sense, and it cannot be once I've built in an area, the only option is open access for me, because that's not open access in my mind.
Well, yeah, open access, I think it's a form of cooperation that is beneficial for us. We are having the largest cooperation together with you, so nationwide. It's working, it's on commercial terms. That's great. And actually, it's helping us as a player to challenge Deutsche Telekom as well, and to avoid that you might get a federal monopoly in that sense, right? I'm poking a bit, but I think we have to prevent you from doing so. This is our
I
role,
have no fear, given how obsessed you seem with us, I have no fear of that, but keep going.
There might be regional significant market power players, but there is definitely only one that is having significant market power nationwide. So I think the more cooperation we are doing, the better, for sure.
Okay. Andreas,
Yeah.
open access is really one of your core strategic position on the market.
Yeah, I mean, although the fact that we are an integrated player, we have a clear strategic commitment towards open access. I mean, that's also what Michael said, that we have one of the biggest FTTH corporations out there, which we are currently putting alive during the course of this year. And obviously, we have many other agreements in place. I think you need to look a bit about the specifics of the German market, right? Because, I mean, Srini said it initially, it's quite expensive to deploy fiber in Germany for good and bad reasons, right? I mean, one of the reasons, obviously, is we put everything underground, and then usually in north of Germany it tends to be a bit more cheaper than in south of Germany, and then obviously we have the whole bureaucratic analog processes, permitting process, different levels between municipalities, federal states, and these kind of things, which just adds additional complexity and cost to the fiber rollout. If you look on really in terms of duplicating infrastructure, I think it's fair to say that in 90% of all the cases, there's probably only going to be one viable network on the long run, let's say, out in Germany. So at the end of the day, whether you like it or not, in terms of monopoly, I think it's a bit of a wrong misperception. The definition is the only thing which is feasible is that you build the infrastructure ideally once, and that you have on commercial terms an open access approach which allows everybody else to make use of it. And I think that is something which we at least are committed, and we do believe in particular that open access on bitstream access or bitstream product is the right way of doing it, right? It lowers hurdles and entry barriers for ISPs. It allows for good and seamless integration between the different players and also for a good service experience. And that is what we need to embrace as an industry more on broader terms, right? And more on commercial terms. And we are committed to do so. The issue is a bit that on the ISP side, we have in essence an oligopoly in the market, right? Which is 85% of the market on the ISP side is between Deutsche Telekom, Vodafone, 1&1 and Telefonica. And they are to a large extent obviously also locked into commitment contracts with Deutsche Telekom, which makes it for all the other players a bit more difficult if they are not sizable to strike wholesale agreements. So I think it's too easy to say that competition in the market is fair if we really compete, but it's also to some extent it gives a certain level of asymmetry. And if you have asymmetry in the market, no regulation or symmetric regulation will just continue having an asymmetric market. And I'm more on the same level playing field, so hope that we're also getting and moving a bit more on that angle as well.
Yeah, and then I'll turn to Klaus on how things...
I think we see here that the market doesn't function on the open access and ISP side. We see in France with hundreds of ISPs, Spain, UK, there's a complete landscape of functional ISPs. Srini, I have to come back to you, sorry. I'll take it with humor. But when we are deploying somewhere and you are going exactly where we are and overbuild it or do your selling in exactly our regions, that's not in the interest of your investors, not in mine. And there is a way to offer you an open access solution and symmetrically the same. And here, you give you my hand, we can sit down, discuss it and find a solution. In a market which is 9% empty, we all need the construction resources. There's no reason to do this. So if we would sit together and find an economical, viable model, which is possible, then we are coming faster to deployment and it is in the interest of the end consumer and the construction company and everyone. So we should all agree the open access is the model of the future, but as it is today with these high construction prices and the, let's say, estimate perception of these 4 ISPs on what is necessary, and I think here, Srini, we are investment funds financed, which are pension funds who want to make a return at some point in time, so do you. And here I don't see that we have ever come to a point that we can have a balanced discussion on that. And we would really, let me know when you're available. We sit down and we come to a solution to avoid the overbuild and balance out our issues which we may have, because economically it is the most sensible thing to do what has been done in all other countries. Other countries are capable of doing it. Why shouldn't it be possible in Germany? I mean, the advantage of Germany is we're the last one deploying fiber. So why should we invent mistakes other countries have overcome already? And I think that's a core element.
Are we going to witness a live negotiation on open access between the two of you?
Please.
Srini, you wanted to reply.
No. Look, we're super economically rational. If there is a sensible whole-buy agreement, we're always there. I mean, we've got 40-odd whole-buy agreements, and there's no reason I would discriminate against Deutsche GigaNetz. When it makes economic sense, we're always there. The only point I'd make is maybe the return requirement of my investors are not the same as private equity, which is maybe my investors are looking for 8 to 10%, not 16 to 20%, which may explain some of the pricing. So that's the only thing I would say, right? But I'm always there.
Klaus.
The regulator is always happy if everybody agrees to open access as a principle, first. Second, we are very happy about every agreement the market will find. That's great. And as a lot of people know, we are working on a regulation. My next meeting with my team is on Friday.
Okay.
Okay.
Many of you have mentioned the cost of deployment, the difficulty with regulation about how deep you dig and all the consequences around that. Is there a way to improve the situation in the short term? I mean, we didn't plan to discuss about it, but it pops up so often in your discussion that I'm just asking, I don't know the situation, how can it be solved? Can it be solved easily? Can it be solved within a short term? Because it seems to be something really slowing down the process.
Look, I mean, I'm happy. Andreas, do you want to go
please.
first? Or, yeah?
We all would agree on this one, so please start.
We have a common interest here, right?
Look, I think this is one of the most fundamental issues. I think we have an opportunity with the current law that's there with the Netzausbaubeschleunigungsgesetz, which is a mouthful in any language, right? But look, I think there is a huge opportunity to use this, and I think, Klaus, you agree as well, to drive this forward. I mean, we can talk about specifics. There are at least 4 specific things which we can do now, right? 1, allow alternative digging methods and make them mandatory in more and more communes. 2, make sure that, there's something called the Online Zugangsgesetz, which is everybody using online. Only 10% of our Kommunen are there, which is why we need to carry bucket loads of paper to them. Make that 10% 100%. It will make things quicker. 3, make sure that you have clear registers on the addresses of the owners of various buildings and allow entry into buildings, because that makes the whole process of utilization significantly quicker. 4, let's look at ways in which we as an industry can actually help the government in defining technical standards for construction, which actually help bring down our cost of construction. I thought last year we made progress for the first time. I think there are 3 or 4 very specific, unfortunately boring, bureaucratic, technical things. But this is what our life is about, right? Because the value lies in that for me. So and I think this bill is a huge opportunity. And there's a 5th, which is why can't we do what we do in quite a few states on mobile sites, where if we do not get the permission in 3 months, the permission is assumed, right? Now, imagine how much easier some of that would make our lives. But I don't, guys, please feel free to add on or build on it.
Maybe to build on what Srini said, I totally agree. I only want to say that we have come alongside already, right? There is a lot of Bundesländer having amended the construction rules, and I think we have to say thank you for that.
I agree.
We are grateful for that because it really speeds up the things. But we have to continue on this track now and really make sure that we are not pushed back in.
We could add 20 more points to that. It's just possible that the future of this country is decided by the Wegewart. Something only exists in Germany. I spare that, but the core message is it takes way too long to change it. Our financing costs, Srini's financing costs, they all continue while we're waiting for improvements. And I said this in the beginning, things have not changed even close to that what we could have done. We know exactly what has to be done. We know how fast it could be done. And to limit ourselves in deployment because of regulation administration is very harmful.
Yeah. But for those in the audience who are not familiar with the way the government is working and procedure are working in Germany, do you think things will sufficiently improve within a certain time frame? Because if we look at 2030, and if I'm listening to you, you urgently need a significant progress, if I'm translating what I'm hearing. Do you think there's a chance that these progresses are made in the next 24 months? Is it something feasible?
Well, let me put that into a context, right? I mean, Srini is right with the points. But he also said very clearly, we are a federal state. We have more than 11,000 municipalities. Decision-making of a lot of those things are happening on the local level. So now you can ask yourself, how fast is that going to be? That you will have convinced everybody on the same standards, which are, by the way, out. We have a new DIN norm since last year, which already should provide a lot of those guidance. There's this Breitband portal already out there, which provides a framework to do a digital kind of permitting process, approval process, these kind of things. Unfortunately, one of the biggest challenges Germany has, beyond also fiber, not only fiber, is that it still has a lot of analog process, bureaucratic hurdles. And in that sense, federal structures do not help us to be fast in adoption of new technology, new processes, new services. So the risk is that it might come too late in terms of supporting our overall ambition of 2030, 100%.
Vincent, we're here to say the truth, right? Clear answer is no. It's not going to happen the time which we all would like to see it. If we don't change it fast in this, what I said, concerted action, we will not come to the political target which is desired.
Please.
Now, for the Bundesnetzagentur, it's a little bit easy to talk on this topic because we are the federal regulator, and everything we talked last 8, 9, 10 minutes is indeed something which is happening on the local level. But to give you just one example where we are in charge, which is not the topic from today, we are also a regulator for the electricity grids. And as you all know, Germany has major challenges in building its electricity grids. 2 years ago, I started. The German Bundestag passed 3 laws speeding up electricity grids. And when we started, we needed 6 years for the planning and the whole process. At the moment, we are down to 3 to 4 years, which is still long, but in a dense country like Germany, there are a lot of things which need to be recognized. So we sped up by 1/3 or half of the time we needed in the past. So it's something we can do. And I just want to be optimistic, and I want to encourage everybody who is into political lobbying, talking to the mayors, talking to the Ministerpräsidenten, governors, and encouraging every party, saying you will all benefit if you speed up with regulation, with everything you need. So I understand your oath to truth. That's great. But I think what we all need is the belief that we can do it, that we can change that. And I personally encourage everybody I meet with my regulator colleagues on a state level saying, yes, you can do it.
Agree. I would echo Klaus's optimism. This was part of my point on, if there is something we can do as an industry, it's this.
Yes.
I might be naively optimistic, but I genuinely believe if we spent more time and energy getting after this stuff, it is possible to move the needle. I think we spend too much time with distractions. As an industry, driving this is probably the biggest thing that benefits all of us.
Yeah.
Violently agree. Yep.
Okay, we have a topic with a good alignment among the 5 of you.
Especially the last sentence, we spend too much time on distraction. If you can agree that this will change, Srini, I would be very happy about the day.
So is copper switch off a distraction at this stage? Or is it something that Germany should start thinking about, planning, testing, implementing?
All those things we are doing right now. And I meet those colleagues, as I mentioned, every 3 months. It's called Gigabit Forum. We have some great scientists sitting in the second row, which help us manage this process, and we are already talking, planning, and having the first examples where we do the switch. I will never say that's easy. And in the beginning of the discussion, I introduced with the average German, a little bit older, a little bit more conservative, who we need to convince that the change is in his interest. But yes, it's happening right now. Germany is on the way from switching from copper to fiber. We can speed up as soon as we've got a little bit more ground under our feet. We will do that, and the Bundesnetzagentur is very engaged and very optimistic in this process. Happening now.
Absolutely.
And we are grateful for a lot of actors very much involved.
We have 2 pilots going this year. That's Alzingen and Wiesbaden. And we'll build on those to learn everything we have to make sure that this works. It's not an easy process. I mean, lots of countries have announced deadlines. I think the one thing common to all those deadlines is they've moved back. Because as Klaus says, it's conceptually easy for the EU Commission to say 2030 and I'll wave a magic wand and it's all gone, right? Real life is a little harder than that. But we're driving those 2 pilots, and we want to go figure out all the issues operationally involved in making them happen.
I mean, it goes without saying that copper decommissioning is a key thing in terms of penetrating and accelerating faster FTTH deployment. So from that perspective, I think there's no alternative of actually doing that. I think the key, knowing from other experience from the past, the devil lies in the detail. There's a lot of work to be done, and I think the EU white paper commission, or for the white paper from the EU Commission, is a clear call for action, right? Whether 2030 is a date, let's see. But I think we need to really speed up, right? Because as I mentioned, it's all about how those processes work, right? What are the requirements in terms of standardization in systems? What are the kind of products? How do we mirror products from the old copper work if we want to continue them in the FTTH world? What are commercial regulatory requirements? How do we make it on a non-discriminatory basis? I mean, knowing how long those things take will require that we really move forward. So it's great to have those pilots, but let's say the really difficult ones is still ahead of us.
Absolutely.
And I'm not, I wouldn't say concerned, but we really need to be mindful and speed up on the topic, because we also have another market review coming up next year. And I would expect that as part of the market review, we also need to find answers to the questions of how to copper decommissional we need to look at, and how the regulatory and commercial framework around that one will look like. So that's why I think it's a really call for action.
Thank you, Andrea. Jan, you raised your hands.
No, that's
anything
fine.
to add? That has been...
We couldn't agree more, yes.
Okay. We're approaching the end of this session. Maybe, coming back to your respective opening statement and many of the points which have been discussed, but we're actually quite concentrated to 3-4 key elements which seems to be concerning most of you. What would be the key action you would expect your organization or the market to take to move the country and the deployment of FTTH throughout Germany in the right direction at the right speed? Klaus, you want to start?
I would tend to repeat myself. We need to listen to the market and understand the market. We need to do a smart regulation where it's necessary, and we need to be a good moderator, and maybe a little bit more, on the copper fiber switch. If we do that properly, the regulator does a good job.
Thank you.
I'm an optimist. Let's work together as an industry to talk about those, whether it's 5 or 20, fundamental process change. So less rhetoric, more getting involved in solving the genuine operational issues that hold Germany back.
I have only one wish or one ask, and this is, let us foster competition, because ultimately competition has brought us on the fast lane, on the overtaking line, and we really, really need to defend it or make sure that in the process of transformation from copper to fiber, which is the right thing to do, is we are not losing competitive edge in that sense. And I would be a guarantee for it to say Vodafone will remain the challenger, and we certainly seldomly agree, but there is common things like rollout where we agree on. So only one ask, competition.
Three things. Let's continue rolling out fiber, and let's make sure that we are actually getting customers on the networks in order to really get the benefits of it, and obviously also the kind of cash flows and returns needed in order to finance even more investments. Second thing is embrace as an industry open access and its full potential. And then let's say define Bitstream as a standard product in order to get going as a framework. And then thirdly, let's speed up on the copper decom and get those frameworks in place in order to really also provide planning accuracy and push on the whole agenda.
Last word.
My first desire would be we come up with real numbers at one point of time. Real numbers and real definitions that the decision makers in politics and among us have a base to decide on. I think this would be my biggest wish for the industry. Second is that we need the freedom to deploy and stop that overbuild, because we don't want to jeopardize the future of this country by overbuilding and then market is empty. But I think here we are moving forward, and then coming to an economical, sound role model, light build, on which we, I think, would all agree on, because that would probably be the biggest accelerator to the industry.
Well, I would like to thank you very much for your participation. Thanking also the audience. I think it's been a great session. I encourage you to continue your presence here at the FTTH conference. There are a lot of very interesting sessions taking place after this one and tomorrow. Thanks again for your participation. There's a coffee break in 3 minutes. And I would like to encourage you to give a big round of applause to a very good panel today. Thank you.